Welcome, everybody, to the panel. Let me introduce everybody. Of course, Jason Schappert, instructor pilot, aviation author, and founder of M0A and RemotePilot101.com. And then Vic Moss, let me try to point to him. Vic Moss over there. He is a member of the FAA Drone Advisory Committee in the Citizen UAS Operators section, and he's the owner of Moss Photography and founder of DSPA. We'll talk about that here in a minute, along with Kenji Sugahara. Am I saying it right?
Sugahara. Yep.
Sugahara. Okay. And he is also on the Drone Advisory Committee. And Drew Camden, president of Roto Riot and FPV God.
Oh man, I wanted to be Drew Camden tonight.
and now the understudy of Drew Camden, ladies and gentlemen, all the way from New Zealand. That's why I put you down there, because New Zealand's down there. Inventor and YouTuber extraordinaire, Bruce Simpson. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. So tonight, we're going to talk all about cats. Nothing else. No, we're going to talk about FAA stuff. So let's start with Vic and Kenji. Maybe you guys can just kind of, for people who don't know what the Drone Advisory Committee is, what is it, and how are you associated with the FAA? How did that come about?
Go for it, Kenji.
So the Drone Advisory Committee is a body that advises the FAA on policies that they're thinking of putting into play. So we just give the FAA advice. And what's unusual and nice this time around is that they actually included drone service providers. So folks who fly drones for a living. I mean, you look at the rest of the folks on there that were on there previously, they're like huge businesses, they're CEOs and all this stuff, who probably never flew a drone in their life. So having some folks in there who actually fly drones, not only for work but for fun, is a great improvement.
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that. But and now you and Vic are the only people in the Citizens UAS Operators section among 36 now. Is it other members?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm looking over the list. You're right. It's like Amazon, UPS. It's like all these, presidents, captain, founder, president, CEOs, and everything. Shouldn't we have just like, Jim Bob hobbyist on there that is just a fan of flying and hobbies, rather than having everybody have a vested interest in it with an attached business? Because there's a lot of people, I'd say most people, fly drones and quads, FPV, fixed wing, everything like that, for fun, mostly. Shouldn't we be better represented in that way?
I'll take this one. Okay.
Right.
You know what? You're right. One of the issues with applying for the DAC is that you have to represent and speak for a community. AMA was there. They're not obviously now. But what you would need is an organization or a leader, I guess would be a good way to put it, because technically I'm not part of it, DSPA on the DAC. I'm just Vic Moss Photography owner, citizen, whatever it was. But I have a very large online presence. So if you had somebody in the FPV, well, David could have been in the FPV community, or Zoe or somebody like that, who would be able to apply and then be the spokesperson for that particular crowd. I think that would be a very good thing to do. The fact that Kenji and I are both on it now, though, is a step in the right direction, because we both are. I mean, we both, I don't use these little guys. Where am I? These little guys back here for business. They're for fun. And just getting into the FPV side of things, I'm a newbie, as they say. But it would have been hopefully in 2 years when our terms are up, we can, y'all can get, or we can get somebody in that represents more of the hobbyist, the FPV side of things.
Yeah. And Vic, you don't know how to do barrel rolls. You don't know how to do flips yet.
Once. I can do it one time with each drone.
Shots fired already.
For joining the DAC, you don't have to do a power loop.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
that's
he doesn't want to do that.
cool.
But Ken, you got a super good point. FPV deserves a voice on the DAC. And, Dave Messina would have been perfect to be on there. And next time I talk to the FAA, I'm going to ask him, hey, these guys deserve representation because it's such a cool type of drone to get into, and it gets a lot of kids into it too. So believe me, what you're saying isn't wrong, and we believe you 100%. We back you 100%.
Okay, are you guys going to be advocates? Because it seems like there's a huge disconnect with all of these huge people that have 3 and 4 car garages and doctorates and everything. They don't know what FPV is all about. Because you can
flown it.
Yeah, or flown it. You cannot fly FPV line of sight. That's why they call it FPV and not LOS.
Right.
Let me just a quick aside. Here's me trying to fly FPV line of sight.
Wait, are the controls different? Oh, shit.
Jesus!
What in the holy hell? Dude, I do not want to fly this.
So, especially when you're starting out FPV, it's a little dangerous. And I've known people that have flown FPV for a while and they can't fly line of sight. So it's absolutely ridiculous to expect that. Thoughts, anyone?
Oh, I definitely think so. I mean, the little bit of FPV I do, and sometimes does turn into doo-doo. It definitely, if I've got my goggles on and then I try and fly them without it, it's like I'm all turned around. So it does make a huge difference when you're trying to fly FPV.
How can we get the feds to understand how they're affecting FPV in particular and the rest of hobbyists? Because you can't lump all of model aviation in together. You just can't. Drew, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think that having a little bit of line of sight skills can't hurt, but to have it be a requirement or to not make that distinguishment is like, it's definitely an oversight. I mean, the way that we fly FPV drones and the purpose that we fly them for, and the potential risks, it's just a completely different profile, right? When you're flying an FPV drone, your altitude is generally going to be lower. You're going to be in more close proximity to things, whereas with line of sight operations, you tend to be at higher elevations, flying in more open areas. I mean, it's not just the skills required or the equipment. It's an entirely different use case on top of that. And that's kind of the scariest part about the regulations being passed, is that FPV, how it's used, the type of equipment that's used, the purpose being used for, is so different from kind of the rest of the use cases that feels like it's going to be very easy to be overlooked. So that's a big concern.
It's a legitimate concern too, but Kenji and I will be there. I mean,
yeah,
we're your voice, like it or like it or hate it. I know some people aren't real thrilled.
No, I just spoke with Dave Messina today, the president of the FPVFC. He and I still talk a good amount. I was disappointed that he wasn't at it. I was bummed to hear that the AMA is no longer represented. It's kind of because also, again, I don't really feel like the AMA has FPV's interests in mind. They certainly represent model aviation, and I think that's great. And I think protections and considerations for model aviation, some of it will carry over to FPV. So I was kind of like, I'll take what I can get. I'll take the AMA being a part of it more than anything else. But ideally, I was really hoping to see the FPV Freedom Coalition represented. So, like you guys were saying, hopefully in 2 years that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, David's on our board, like I mentioned earlier. So he is on the DAC for all intents and purposes. He is there with us. So we have your back or your front or whatever.
do you see?
Dave and I actually have a conversation, are scheduled to have a conversation with Jay over, who's the head of the integration office tomorrow, and we're going to talk about some of the issues, like the visual line of sight stuff and the remote ID. And we're going to be asking for some clarification because there is some potential stuff that could be not so good, but I think the way you can read the rule, it's not as bad as we think. But yeah, I know what it's like to rip around between trees and stuff and do those power loops and just dive between things and go underneath things, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. And it was mind blowing for me the first time I put on goggles and tried it, coming from sort of the DJI world and all that stuff, and strapping on the FPV, and I had a blast. It was probably some of the most fun that I've ever had, and I got the bug. And knowing that, one of my goals, I don't know if it'll happen, is to get folks on the DAC to actually try FPV and just be
yes,
either put them on or make them puke. You know?
Yeah.
Wow.
How much?
Jason and goggles.
How much influence?
If you guys can set that up, you tell them I'll bring a whole case of drones and some goggles, and I'll get all y'all flying.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
You just let me know when and where, because I think that's exactly what you're saying is very true. That it's such an experience that you can describe it, you can show them a cool YouTube video. It's great and all, but when you actually put on the goggles, that's when your eyes are actually open to what it means.
Yeah, it's the closest thing to flying that humans can get. Jason, if you'll keep an eye on the chat, if there's any questions that people have, if you can, set those aside. Yep. And Bruce, we're going to get into some of the technical stuff that you've been talking about, of course. But before we get off this topic, I wanted to ask you guys, how much influence will you have? Wow. How much influence, pardon me, will you guys have with the rest of the board as far as being an advocate for us?
As much as we can. Now, remember, we're just an advisory board, just like every other federal agency has their advisory boards or councils, committees, sorry. So will everybody listen to us? I certainly hope so, because Kenji and I plan on listening to them. It's not going to be, it's going to be a cooperative situation where we can work with somebody rather than against somebody, because I think more can get done there. But let's see. I mean, we are the small businessmen on the committee. So let's hope. I mean, we both have the experience behind us, at least in the business world and some of the other stuff. So hopefully our voices will be heard. I think they will be. I have no reason to think they won't.
Shall I say something?
Yes, please, Bruce. Yes.
I've been sitting here listening, lapping it all up. We've got you guys are the citizen members of the DAC, and as Ken quite rightly pointed out, where is the hobby representation? If you look at the numbers, I've just been crunching the numbers. There are 1.7 million registered drone pilot or operators in the USA, but there are only 200,000 Part 107 operators, which means that over 85% of the people flying drones are not doing it for monetary return or in furtherance of business. They're doing it for fun. Yet the people who are doing it for pure fun have zero official representation on the DAC by way of members. That's an incredibly loaded device. I know that Kenji and Vic will do their best, but the FAA has shown by choosing people that are not purely recreational, they don't really care. And excuse me if I don't have a lot of reverence for a government organization that would steal my videos and then try and cover it up later. I mean, trust is something that is earned. It's not a right. The FAA has earned no respect from me because they're a bunch of cowboys, honestly. And I think all the way along here, they've shown that they've got an agenda, they've got a goal. The hobbyists are a nuisance, they're an annoyance. So I think Vic and Kenji are being very charitable by suspecting that they'll be listened to. They'll be listened to because, as we saw in the submission process, it is legally required for them to solicit submissions, but they don't have to do anything as a result of it. And I noticed that a lot of the AMA saying, oh, we did a wonderful thing. We got things changed with our submissions, but people have overlooked one thing. If you get the final rule and search for the phrase at this time, see how many times that's mentioned in the final rule. They didn't say we're not going to have network component to the RID. They're saying we're not going to do it at this time. And it wasn't because of anything the AMA said. It was because the technology isn't there, right? The infrastructure to do the network remote ID as originally outlined simply isn't there. So they had no option but to drop that from the final rule. There is a lot of stuff in that final rule. They are placating the hobby a little bit, and it's a bit of a fraud to say these are citizen representatives because everybody on that DAC is a citizen, but they didn't have a non-commercial or a recreational representative for the 85% of people who fly drones in America. That is just, I thought it was a democracy, but it's not. It's so totally loaded. And they want to regulate these people, but they're not giving them an official voice on the DAC. And I think that really, really sucks. But one thing, Kenji's here. I'm glad you're here. You've got a patent on remote ID. Now, what I'd like you to do, Kenji, is say to the FAA, you can use my patent as long as you don't force remote ID on recreational drone flyers. Why don't you do that, Kenji?
First off, let me start out by saying this, Bruce. All that you said, you're actually right. The fact that there's tons of recreational folks out there is a travesty, and I agree with you 100%. The second point that, hey, quiet. Sorry about that. I have kids in the background. That they didn't rule out network ID. That is absolutely true. So we have to stay on top of that because there is that threat of Big Brother. Yes, I do have a patent, and it's straight up, I haven't figured out what it can do in terms of how it can be used or anything like that. So I just put in an application for it and just got it. So to be honest, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. So I'd love to, but I can't tell you that I'm going to do that right now, Bruce. And just to be upfront, yeah.
Here's the challenge. I'll put it to you. It's up to you whether you decide to do it or not. And I know that the echo. Where'd that come from? And I know Vic and I have crossed swords here and there on comments and videos and things.
It's been fun.
Yeah. I mean,
I love your passion.
I love when people disagree with me because it gives me a chance to have a fight. But more importantly, you never learn unless you listen to what other people. If you listen to your own voice all the time, you never learn a damn thing. You've got to listen to everyone else, and everybody's opinion is equally important. Not necessarily as valid as mine, but as important.
You and I agree on that. It's not as valid as mine either.
And this is why I'm a little wondering also regarding the DAC appointments, because I mean, Vic says you say you've got a high profile in the community, but when you look at some of the other people like Dave's got the Freedom Coalition thing. Zoe's got a few subscribers. There are other people out there who might have been better suited in terms of reaching this audience. Now, Vic's been very active recently, appearing on streams like this, and he's really put himself out there to try and engage with the community. But I wouldn't say, and this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation, I wouldn't say that you're as engaged with the FPV community and the recreational flying community as a lot of other people who ran for that position. So why do you think they chose you and not some of the other candidates?
I don't know why they chose me. I guess we can find out. But you're right in that I'm not as engaged in the, well, that's not even true. I'm very engaged in the recreational community as well. When I'm helping people online, I don't care if they're 107, 44809, 12 years old or 112 years old. I want to help them learn how to fly safe. And that is what's going to happen. I mean, Kenji and I are your choices at this point. So what I would ask you then is, what is the disconnect between me as a recreational pilot versus me as a commercial pilot? And what affects one affects the other just as much. We don't want to have to pay more. We don't want to have to go through more hoops to jump through more hoops to fly wherever, at DIA or Dallas Fort Worth or, my park. We've got three parks here in Lakewood, Colorado, where I live, which we worked with the Parks Department to get open for recreational flyers. So I do work with that. But what I'm having trouble understanding from, and not arguing, well, I am arguing, but nicely. Where's the disconnect between the commercial and the hobby side? Because all rules affect us the same.
Well, the FAA has chosen to draw a distinction between commercial and non-commercial. They're one of the few regulators in the world now that does that, which shows you how far behind the times they are. In the EU, there is no separation. In the UK, there's no separation. In New Zealand, there's no separation. They recognise that a flight, the risk profile of a flight is not determined by whether someone's making money. It's determined by where you're flying and what craft you're flying. That's how the EU rules work. So America's so out of touch. And so, but the problem is the FAA has put this distinction in there. So they're the ones that have created this disconnect between the commercial community and the recreational community. And they've chosen not to provide the recreational community with direct representation on the deck, which speaks to their motives and their agendas.
Well, you and I'll disagree on that, but that's cool. Where the differentiation came between commercial and recreational is a holdover from the manned aviation side. Remember, the FAA is working from manned aviation and always has been, and they're trying to shoehorn drones in RC and FPV, and we're just going to, the all-encompassing drones. When they first started getting into this, they thought, okay, the commercial folks will be more likely to take chances because they're getting paid to make that shot. And my argument against that has always been, no, we're going to be more careful because that's our livelihood. So when it comes to safety, when it comes to the rules and the regulations, there really should be no, in my opinion, I'm not speaking for DAC, I'm not speaking for the FAA, I'm speaking for Vic, there should be no differentiation between the two communities because it's all the same. We're in the air, we're in the National Airspace System, we're flying our drones and RC and FPV, and we want to be safe and not hurt anybody. So there really shouldn't be that differentiation, but you know what, there is, and that's what we got to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you on that. But one thing
maybe
is
a way to use that to help in that, if you want FPV representation, why don't you get someone from Get FPV or Rotor Riot or a company that's in FPV? So you could say that I have a vested interest, or Tim Nielsen or any company in FPV has a vested interest in the commercial business side of things, but ultimately their market is FPV and they will want the FPV community to be protected. So
you
Bruce
say
can call
you
you
get,
want,
like me,
but like
me
you're
and
not going to
Kenji?
change American culture on overnight. It's an issue, right? So we have to kind of how do we look at the hand we're dealt and what can we do about it? How can we play in the system?
Once again, just to remind everybody that these guys aren't the FAA. They're just
right.
on the committee. So they're an intermediary, and that's why we're discussing this with them. But it does seem to the FPV community that the FPV community will be collateral damage with whatever this final rule will be. And Bruce, it says the final rule, but it's not the final rule. It's ever evolving.
I'm hoping that none of these regulators learn from each other. We've got the same craft, the same airspace. The risk profile should be identical from country to country, but we've got such different rules that obviously no one's done the risk assessment, as I mentioned many times before. And I looked to Canada. In Canada, sub 250, no prescriptive rules. Just don't hurt people, don't break stuff, and don't endanger aviation. And as far as I'm aware, there has not been one incident involving sub 250 craft in Canada that has resulted in injury, significant property damage, or death. So that's working really, really well. So in America, you're still regulating craft under 250 grams. It makes no sense. And then you require remote ID if they're going to be used for putting videos on a YouTube channel. If I get a little, tiny whoop and I want to put a video on it on my YouTube channel, I have to fit a 30 to 50 gram remote ID. I can't fly the damn thing anymore. It makes no sense. And this is the problem that clearly that doesn't concern the FAA because they'd rather have, by the impression we all get is they'd rather have hobbyists out of the airspace so that commercial operators don't have to deal with that because it's all about the money. We know that. If it wasn't about the money, there'd be direct representation by non-commercial interests on the deck.
Canadians are smarter and better.
Well, look,
actually, the Canadians are great, and a lot of their regulations we see coming out of Canada are pretty common sense. And sometimes I do wish that the FAA took some cues from our partners in some other countries because there's some great sort of examples out there. I mean, the implementation of Jairus and Sora coming out of Europe is fantastic. Which is sort of a safety, construct, and they analyze a lot of stuff using that. And I wish the Americans, we started using that a little bit more often. I submitted for an exemption using the Jairus Sora method, and they're like, "What's that?" I'm like, "It's the in thing in Europe, and it." If you use it, it gives you some solid metrics to go against and gives you good guidance. So there's a lot of tools out there, and I think we as Americans really need to look at other countries too for guidance and some help because we don't need to reinvent the wheel in a lot of instances. So Bruce, I'm on board with you.
I'd like to see Vic and Kenji working really hard, and you guys, I'd love you to prove, put the actions behind the words because that'd be great for the entire hobby. So at this stage, you've got the benefit of the doubt. I'll let you do it.
Kenji,
we're going to try. I mean, we are just advisors. Okay, we have not been appointed to the round table. So
but I think just the fact that you guys are here on this podcast to begin with shows that you give a crap.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do. I get it.
Y'all are here. and that proves something, right? So I'm happy we got someone.
Yeah, and Kenji, by the way, Kenji is frozen.
Am I frozen?
Yeah, you're
Kenji,
frozen.
Yeah,
but
you're
you're
frozen.
kissing everybody,
Yeah.
so that works.
Do you want me
Winter
to?
in the hemisphere.
I can
Hey,
call you
Ken,
back.
I'm gonna restart my computer because I think my computer froze. So,
Yeah, I'll hang up. I'll hang up with you, and I'll call you back in what, 2 minutes or something?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Right.
In the meantime,
Yeah.
What I do want to point out, one of the things is, yeah, you're right, FPV's not there, but the real work on the DAC gets done in the task groups, and who is incredibly, obsessively active in those task groups is Dave Messina. He probably does more work on the task group than any of the other members do of the DAC. So yeah, there's no seat at the table for the FPV. Whether or not y'all get along with Dave, that's not the point. But he is in there with doing his darndest to keep the FPV community going, and which is why he and Kenji are also going to be in the phone call tomorrow.
What is the limit for members of the DAC? It's at 36 now. How many?
36.
How many
I
more?
pulled all that up, but I went past that page.
Is there room at the table for a Zoe, who was going to join us tonight, but she's been sick?
Oh, I
yeah,
feel
so-
bad for that.
Hi, Zoe.
And why did
You know,
they drop?
Yeah, I was
I don't
second
see it.
choice.
I don't know
was
if it's
I
full
was
or not.
Ken's second choice.
Yeah,
TV
no, man.
pilots.
Why did they drop Brendan Schulman? I'm wondering why they dropped Brendan, because Brendan was the one guy there for the hobby. He was bringing in facts, evidence to show that a lot of the assertions being made were totally wrong. The risk was not as high as proposed. He was the guy that was embarrassing them with unfortunate but accurate facts. Is that why they dropped him?
No idea. I've talked with Brendan, and he's not sharing, which is totally his.
Yeah, but I get the impression that they didn't like Brendan because he was showing things as they were, and that's not a good fit on a committee you want to load up to just support whatever you want to do with all the big
I
names
just
from Boeing
assumed
and
they
lots.
dropped Brendan because of the growing tensions between
It might have
the government and DJI, right? I mean, they're basically trying to push DJI out.
Is Brendan Chinese?
Because of
He
the big
doesn't look
China
Chinese.
fear.
Yeah. By the way,
that's
people may be wondering why Bruce, who lives in New Zealand, even cares about what the FAA is doing, other than the fact that sometimes they steal his content. But
America's the center of the world. Even if you're not here, you can't help but talk about us.
that's kind of the point that I was going to make. And Jason, I think you'll agree that, and I've been told by people around the world that the FAA, when the other agencies around the world will follow suit with what we pave the way for them, and they'll kind of copy us a little bit.
I've been listening over here, and you're right. Canada early on talked about following a lot of the FAA rules and regulations and really hasn't done much. EASA has been saying for years now that they're going to come out with something, COVID delays it, this delays it. We're still waiting for more rules and guidance on that. And Vic made a really great point earlier as to why are we separated between a hobbyist and a commercial pilot. And he was spot on. It comes from manned aviation. If I want to fly a Cessna 172, something small even, for hire, for compensation or hire, I need to be a commercial pilot. They just trickled that on down because of one thing. It's the external pressures. It's
but
wow.
Remember,
Go ahead.
Canada has manned aviation. The EU has manned
Sure.
aviation. New Zealand has manned aviation. We've been able to say no distinction. So why can't America do it? I'm saying it's
Sure.
manned aviation. In other countries,
Yeah.
it doesn't make a difference.
No. Yeah, and I'm not agreeing or disagreeing. I'm just saying, I mean, that's where it came from. It's just easier to trickle down. Hey, we're doing this here. It works. Let's just trickle it down here. Because I don't believe, you remember, especially Bruce, August 16th, 2016, when we launched Part 107, the FAA website crash, I think it was 2 people working everything drones for the FAA, and we had 600,000 registrations and just all this craziness that I don't think the FAA ever expected drones to be this big. And I think they've always been behind, always playing catch up with this. And they're finally starting to catch up and hopefully going to start doing some things right.
Innovation always outpaces legislation.
That Americans, I mean, it's supposed to be land of the home and free of the brave or whatever it is. I don't know, I'm not American, but you guys seem to be just rolling over and taking it, because the FAA is saying we have to do this because of the dangers and the risks, and this because of the dangers and the risks, and we still have the death toll associated with the use of recreational use of multi-rotor drones is 0 anywhere in the world in the entire history of the planet. Yet how many people have died as a result of taking selfies as a result of terrorist attacks using pressure cookers. There's so many things that have caused real actual loss of life and pose a much greater threat and are nowhere near as regulated. So we've got to say, what's going on here? It's not safety. It's not safety at all. And then they say security. You know, we've got to ban DJI drones because they're Chinese made, but you can use an American drone with a Chinese tablet. Excuse me, the data's still coming back. What's going on there? There's no sense to it. It is so,
there will
ultimately,
always
it comes down
be
to regulating a technology and a thing that's just not understood, and it seems that that's unfortunately been the American way, and it's something I've always hated. I think you need to regulate the crime and the action, not the tool with which it's committed. I think I often just use baseball to draw analogies, right? So, if I'm standing on top of a building, and well, not me, I can't throw a baseball that well. Let's say Trevor Bauer, he's standing on top of a building. How high can he throw a baseball? That's how high I should be able to fly my drone without the FAA giving a crap. And if I could throw a baseball and hit an airplane, there's a bigger problem than my drone. The airplane is way too close to me, right? So regulate the action. You fly up a drone and hit an airplane. I mean, that's punishable, but don't.
That's the other thing. They're talking about regulating drones, regulate drones, but we won't. Why aren't they regulating manned aviation to reduce the risk of danger from drones? As I've said many times, if manned aviation stays 500 and above and drones stay 400 and below, there is zero risk of any interaction between manned aviation and unmanned aviation.
And you could even split it up. You could even split it up between the dreaded commercials, right? So give us, 0 to 200. Give us recreational guys can do whatever we want. 200 to 400, Amazon can make their money, and 4 to 5 is a barrier. 500 is manned.
It's like we stratify traffic. We have a freeway where the cars go really fast. We have a sidewalk where you can walk. And the FAA keeps saying we want to integrate drones into the national airspace. You don't put pedestrians on a freeway. You don't integrate them into the traffic flow. You separate them. You segregate.
Ultimately,
we just need a bike lane.
Why can't we have a bike lane? Ultimately,
not a bike lane.
I said this before, but the FAA is trying to legislate common sense. They're always going to try to discourage dumbasses, because as you know, when you first get a drone, how high, how far, how fast, there's no law yet that says a 14-year-old can't go to Walmart and fly a thing up as high as it'll go. That's up to responsible parents.
The best thing we could do as a community or as group of recreational pilots is drill down to the things we're asking for, right? I just saw Mike's Adventures in the chat saying I'd be very happy with 200 feet. I think a big percentage of hobbyists would be very happy with being able to fly up to 200 feet. I know some disc launch people, they want to go higher, but if we could drill down to what are our asks, what are reasonable things that we could ask for and focus on hitting that, rather than trying to shift the entire paradigm of American government
and look
under the vehicle
countries.
Of drones, I think they would be more effective.
Don't reinvent the wheel. Look to other countries. In New Zealand, we have a thing called a shielded operation, which means I can go and fly an aircraft or model or drone below the level of the tallest object within 100 meters. And because there will never be a manned aircraft flying under the trees in our local park, the Civil Aviation Authority, our regulator, says, well, you don't have to worry about that. You don't need permission, because it's safe. It's not going to endanger any aircraft. But the FAA don't make that distinction. I mean, why not? That would give people, if you want to fly bandos and things like that, as long as you're staying below the nearest tree in the district, you'd be safe. You wouldn't need all that rubbish that you got thrown on you. It's a simple solution to a problem. And it's also a very tiny problem. How many people have been killed or badly? None. It's just the problem doesn't exist.
I think that's where the FAA needs a big check. They need to be checked in that they are trying to, anything that can levitate, they're like, oh, that's ours to send rules over, even if you're indoors. I mean, there was a point in some of the initial rulings where it seemed that they were trying to even say what you could and couldn't do indoors, and they just need a big check to be like, dude, what is actually navigable airspace? What's your actual role as a federal agency? Your actual role is to make it safe for manned aviation. That's really what it's about. So if I'm flying below the treetops, what are you even doing in the room? Go away. I should be able to fly under the canopy. This has nothing to do with
standing up. The American modelers aren't standing up and saying, we're not going to have it. For example,
53,000 people would disagree with you with that.
I'm not sure what you mean by we're not standing up. I mean,
they'll follow the rules.
Heaps and heaps of comments made.
You had comments, but talk is cheap. I mean, people should be saying,
And
"Look, we
action's not. So it's
Literally
like engine
flew
hire
to
there.
DC, picketed outside.
Yep.
Yeah, but
What exactly
prohibition
is
in
it
the
you would like
1920s
to see us be doing, Bruce?
I'd like you learn from history. Learn from history. In the 1920s, alcohol was prohibited. It was banned. It was outlawed. People just kept drinking. So eventually, the government decided, well, this
I'm
is a
still
pretty
flying.
stupid rule. No one's paying it. No one's adhering to this rule. So we will strike that out. And then we had the rule that stopped you from smoking marijuana or possessing marijuana, and everyone just smoked and possessed marijuana. So now it's being decriminalized in states around the world. If you don't follow a rule, eventually the people who make the rules realize this rule's making us look stupid because no one's following it.
Well, that's the thing. Nobody's going to stop.
Today should we not be following? Because there's no real rule today.
Well, that comes down to
one would have been registration. I said, don't register. Why are you registering as an offender just because you got a toy drone? It makes no sense.
Well,
at all. And the whole we're talking about. You were saying about this, the airspace, but we've got the ridiculous situation in the USA where if I build an ultralight aircraft and I fly it myself, I don't need any training. I don't need to register it. It doesn't need to be certified. But if I build a 250-gram model of that very same craft, I have to register it. I have to register myself.
It's easy for us. It's easy for us as this community to be outraged because we're on the forefront. We understand very well what we're doing, and each individual, GPS drones, what they do, what FPV drones, what fixed wing, and everything else, what that does. That clip I showed earlier, that horrible TV show that vilified that poor little toy drone, is an example of the disconnect that most people have in the world about what drones are, because it's still the Wild West. It's still very new. It's not as Wild West as 2015, 2016, 2014, but it's still very new. And it's the reason why the FAA is trying to make a stick figure sticker. And by that, I mean the stick figure sticker you see on a soda machine so that a dumbass doesn't shake it and get crushed. That's the way they have to think. They have to think in broad terms for everybody. Unfortunately, there are no drone police that can go out there and say, well, you're doing it right, you're doing it wrong. Or,
But how smart are the FAA? They cannot actually tell the difference between something like a Phantom or a Mavic with GPS that anyone can buy from a shop and fly without any training, and a freestyle drone, which has no GPS. And if you try and fly it without training, you just crash into the ground. Even after training, I still crash into the ground. These are two totally different craft with totally different use cases, totally different risk profiles. But the FAA says there's no difference. You're covered by exactly
and most
the same.
importantly, a very different barrier to entry. I think one person that goes to Best Buy and buys this drone, they are they're the type of person that might not know what the hell they're doing and just go fly over an airport. By the time, go to the freestyle bookend, by the time that you've put together your carbon fiber plates, soldered up an ESC, figured out what the heck Betaflight is, you probably don't want to be doing stupid stuff, and you've gone through the fire.
It's not common knowledge yet. When automobiles first came out, people are confused about where they can go, how fast they can go, the speed limit, where to stop, what side of the road to drive on even. So I don't know how many years that took to regulate that, but it's just common knowledge now. But drones are not common knowledge.
I think if you look now, I think everyone knows what drones are. I mean, it's in the media all the time that we're trying to knock down helicopters and peer in people's windows.
Oh yeah,
so everyone knows what a drone is.
Yeah.
But one of the best things our community can do is to raise or improve the profile of drones. But we don't seem to be putting a lot of effort into that. Every time there's a story in this country which paints a drone in a bad light, I write to the editor. I correct all the misinformation and things, and sometimes it works, sometimes I'm ignored, but we all must be doing that. So every time we see a drone story which is ridiculous, like that one on that TV series that Ken showed earlier, everyone needs to write to that television broadcaster and say, this is rubbish. And if they get 5,000 letters about it, or emails, they might start rethinking how they portray these things.
Yeah. Kenji, welcome back.
I'm back. I actually updated Skype, and hopefully it'll stick around.
Okay.
But it looks like I missed some pretty good conversation. But
no, it's been crap. It's been terrible.
Get the gist of it. One thing that I want to mention is that there's a certain arc that new technology sort of follows, and it's a fear cycle. So it starts with it's a new technology, neat, whatever, and then the fear kicks in. It happened with Kodak cameras a long, long time ago. It happened with cell phone cameras when they first came out. Do you remember? If you guys are old enough, people were freaking out. Oh, they're going to take pictures in the locker room. There's going to be upskirts everywhere and all that stuff. But guess what? Everybody started using it, and it's like every day. And I think we're still in that fear period. So you're seeing a lot of legislators and whatever still freaking out about it. But I think as it becomes more and more common, people understand the good uses that you can use drones for. Even delivery. I know they're evil. They want certain things, but once it becomes more commonplace like that, it's going to fade into the background. Nobody's going to care.
Well, let me.
Do you really think, Kenji, that there are going to be drones delivering pizzas flying over urban and suburban
areas? That's exactly
rubbish. It's just not going to happen.
I'm so glad you agree with me, Bruce. So glad you agree with me.
You know that.
I've said it all the time. There's no freaking way I'm going to get my tube socks ordered from some drone that's going to land in my yard. It's not going to happen. It's not practical. Never.
You think about like
never.
You're never going to land a rocket. Are you kidding me?
No.
You cannot do it. Everyone at NASA said
never
you
say
can't.
never.
No one knows better than freaking NASA.
Just because you can do something doesn't mean it will.
The physics of it. This is about the economics of it. They will never be economical. Who wants drone delivery? Oh, you can't have a drone delivery.
It's because you're still thinking lithium polymer. Just wait for supercapacitors. It's over.
No. Supercaps don't have the ability to do.
Do you remember? Do you remember?
It's a physical limitation.
Do you guys remember? Do you guys remember phones on planes? Do you remember telephones?
When these companies start delivering stuff over our heads, if this fear thing is going to be there, it's going to shoot down Amazon. Already in Australia, when Google did trials, people objected because just the noise alone. So the trouble is that the hobby is being vilified, but I think a lot of the commercial operators don't realize that this vilification is going to transfer over to when they want to actually start using them to make money. People are going to say, no, these are evil, dangerous. They're spying on my daughter in the bedroom. I don't care if Amazon's running or it's some kid down the block. We don't trust them. We don't want them in the skies over our heads. And that's another reason why it's going to be a long way off before we see a large-scale commercial use of drones in urban or suburban areas.
Yeah, there will be drone delivery in urban areas, but you're not going to send tube socks from the Amazon Central out into an urban area, especially in, dare I say, in Kentucky, where some idiot's going to shoot that thing down, by golly. You're over my property, and I don't care what the government says. You can get out of my business. Boom.
But have you noticed, Ken, that the companies that are all out there vying for this, we've got Google. Google is a service company. We've got Amazon. Amazon is a service company. It makes most of its money from Amazon Web Services and providing services to people. They are not going to be delivering stuff by drone. This is just a fabrication. What they want to do is establish that this is a viable thing and other companies will come in and start doing this. They want to provide the UTM services, the management services, the clip the ticket for every movement in the airspace, which is why network ID was such a big thing. That's why Google has strongly criticized the removal of network ID from the remote ID bill, because it removes their ability at this stage to start providing a service and clipping the ticket. Google and Amazon make their money by providing services to other people that do things, and that's what they intend to do. They're not going to be delivering stuff by drone, they know that, but all they need to do is cement in the eyes of the rest of the community that drone delivery is going to happen, and then the FAA steps in and says, well, we need to have this big UTM and everyone will have to sign up to it. That's the long game, and people don't realize that.
Yeah, they're.
I'll agree with you partly, Bruce, and disagree in another part. Google, you're right. I think their play is UTM, and one of the reasons that they objected was they've sunk a lot of money into sort of UTM and network remote ID and all that stuff, and I think that's why sort of they took that stance on the broadcast remote ID. But I do think, like Amazon, there's other third parties who will end up using drone delivery. The other piece too is there are some delivery folks who are actively testing for like medical supplies to get things to places quickly, like heart transplants and whatever, where time is of the essence.
Yeah, great point.
But I think what Bruce is getting at is that it doesn't really matter, because I'm with you. Drone delivery is going to happen in some form or another. But really the point, I think what Bruce is saying is that it's why the larger corporations in our space is scary is not because they want to do deliveries. It's because they want to impose technology that they can profit off of and have regulations in place that require us to use a service that Amazon provides so that we can be tracked, whether it's to, take real estate photography or have a drone race or whatever, they want to get in on it.
We're an annoyance to them.
There's some truth to that.
Yeah, we're basically pests is what we are to large corporations.
No, we're not pests. We are
a
The
revenue
product.
source.
Yeah.
We're
It's
the
pay to
product.
fly. They want a pay to fly situation.
Now,
Yeah,
Yeah.
And Bruce, that's absolutely right, because the director of aviation in Oregon, who was a buddy of mine before he retired, that was one of his biggest fears when he saw an ad from one of these large companies or a presentation. He was afraid that it would end up with the privatization of airspace, which is really the common good for all of us. And that what your comment right there, Bruce, really strikes home. Do we really want to be in a situation where we have to pay to play? I don't want to go there. It's a public resource, and we should be able to access it. And if it's for safety, sure, yeah.
I'm pretty old. Don't let these youthful good looks fool you. I've been around a while, and I've seen it happen so many times. What governments do is they take away your freedoms, and then they sell them back to you as privileges.
Wow.
well, we're going to talk a little bit more about the technology involved with remote ID in just a minute. I wanted to stop and get with Jason real quick. Do we have any questions from the chat?
A lot of people are asking more about UTM. That's been a buzzword for quite some time. So if they want to elaborate more on UTM and how Amazon and Google are pushing for that and what that really means, and I'll find a few more for you.
All right. Vic?
Vic, do you want to get the Cliff Notes, or do you want me to take that one?
Is Vic still there?
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here. UTM is in concept. It's people are working on it. It is going to happen in one way or another. It's just at what depth will it be, basically, at this point.
By the way, people are asking what UTM is.
Oh, unmanned traffic management.
Okay.
It's basically the highway department of the sky, I think, is probably a good way to put that. Kenji's a lot more knowledgeable about this than I am.
Yeah, so just think of it like air traffic control for the air, and that's what it really is. It's to manage a system to manage unmanned traffic in the national airspace. So that happens electronically. There's a couple ways it can work. There's thoughts of using it as pre-planning. So with these big unmanned service providers, they talk to each other. The big companies share their flight plans so they don't run into each other. They want to use it so that unmanned aircraft that are autonomous don't crash into each other, sort of last minute collision prevention, that sort of thing. And also just to as a remote ID sort of system, so people know where each other is. So that's the sort of general framework.
There's always going to be an outlaw component to this, and I hate to make this connection, but I will tell you, guns have been around forever, right?
Huh?
And they're regulated. How many
There's a reason I'm wearing long sleeves.
There's the gun show. How many unregistered drone gun owners are there in the country? I mean, people are just going to do their thing, no matter what. So
the term is civil disobedience, right? I think when at the current point, the rules are, they're reasonable, right? Register your drone or don't register your drone. Use AirMap or don't use AirMap. And I just fly all the time, and it's pretty chill. As things actually come into effect, because right now it's still just talk. It's still just words on paper, right? It'll actually show what are reasonably followable rules and what just falls under civil disobedience. And when there's actual legal case, when someone actually gets taken to court because they were flying FPV under the tree canopy, that's when anything will actually mean anything. That's, we're years away from that.
The way it's going to work is in 2022, when the remote ID rule for manufacturer comes into play, what you're going to see is most consumer off-the-shelf, all the consumer off-the-shelf drones, they'll have to comply. So as time goes on, you'll see more and more of those out as people replace their old drones, whatever. So they'll be compliant. There's the home builds, which we do, like we build our drones. There's the sort of AMA field guys. Yeah, some of them won't comply. You're right. That's a complete fact of life. It's just like folks who drive. Some of them don't drive with insurance. Some of them don't drive with a license. You know, so there's always that aspect. The way I think most people want to comply and want to be a good citizen, and so there'd be compliance for that. And the other piece too is the enforcement will come when something bad happens. That's when you'll see someone punished.
Yeah, it always seems like there has to be a horrible plane crash killing hundreds of people before they change something in the aviation community. That's just economics, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But again, I think that the big thing is that the FAA needs to check in what their actual jurisdiction is, and that they want to require all drones sold. I can buy all sorts of vehicles that are not street legal. Today, I can go buy an ATV. And the expectation is don't drive it on a public road, drive it in your yard. Why shouldn't I be able to buy or build a drone and fly it below 100 feet or under trees or in my backyard and property that, like, thinking about going out into my backyard and that the federal government is regulating the airspace starting at 1 inch above the grass is like banana town. It's just banana town. They need a check in what they actually have a say over.
It's more work.
They're going to prevent all sale of non-compliant drones. I mean, how can you even do that?
You can't make a blanket thing. You just can't. It's hard. It's a lot more work to make these different applications of the rules.
You know, that I agree with you, Drew, but that also works to our favor too. You've seen here in Florida, the city of Orlando tried to just outlaw all drones within city limits.
That went away.
Exactly. All that
but it was a thing for like a month.
It was. But that's the thing where it's just like, hey, you don't regulate, 1 foot above. As soon as we're in the air, city of Orlando, that's not your air. I'm sorry, that's the FAA's air. So your argument can work both ways for us. So we have to find that happy medium.
I'm kind of at odds with most people in the community, and I know the FPVFC, they disagree with me on this, but personally, I would rather argue with Orlando than Washington, D.C. because we won Orlando. This already happened. So if you want to use that argument works against you. Orlando said no drones anywhere, and it took about a month for them to be like, okay, sorry.
Because it became federal.
I can argue with Orlando. I can argue with Detroit. I can argue with Cleveland. But like, I'm going to argue with Washington, D.C.
Well, remember, though, the argument that won Orlando was you don't have control. It was the federal government has control of that. That's what won the argument in Orlando. We're going to do the same thing in New Mexico. That just dropped last week. So that's the things that, again, you're right. It's double-edged.
Go about it.
It's double-edged. But
still,
sword.
Right now we're fighting a federal agency, and it's one big. I guess it's just what's more manageable: one giant fight with the FAA, or a bunch of smaller fights with local municipalities. I get where you're coming from. I just think the concept from just a conceptual standpoint that the federal government is regulating this far above the ground of my driveway.
And that's so we don't get the patchwork of rules. And that's exactly what it is. Are they all right? No, that's not the point. That's not my argument. But the argument is we don't have to fight every single small state, municipality, whatever. We can use that federal preemption argument pretty much to shut them down. And if that goes away, FAA says 200 feet's not ours, every single town and city and municipality and homeowners association, it is how you win the fight.
You want to put your faith in the federal government?
I will win the fight the best way I can. I will win the fight the best way I can.
And right now, that's the best way. But I think right now, the federal government is proving that they're idiots and they don't understand.
States are worse. Cities are worse.
And I would just strip them of their authority from 0 to 200 feet. And that is me. I know I'm pretty alone in a lot of the community on that.
I've fought a lot of bureaucrats over the years, and I can tell you one thing is that they do not respond to logic, common sense, facts, or evidence. They live in a fantasy world where whatever they think is the reality of the world, and anything else that comes along like inconvenient facts is just dismissed. At the local council here and where I live, I went in yesterday and pointed out that they've been in breach of civil aviation regulations for the past year in the way they've been running the airfield, and it caused an incident just before Christmas. The response from the council was to ban me from speaking to council anymore. That's it. This is the way these bureaucrats work. Well, we don't like the facts. Let's shoot the messenger. We don't have to listen to the facts. We can claim plausible
Bruce,
deniability.
it's not about what you say, it's how you say it.
Bingo.
I am so diplomatic, mate. I am Mr.
Oh,
Diplomacy.
Lordy, no.
You know that.
All right. All right, everybody get back to your corners.
This is fun.
Get back to your corners.
Bruce, I love it.
All right.
Jason, I totally agree with both of you. You know, you both make very good points, and that's the thing is we're faced with these choices and these things that could eventually go against us. But there is a solution out there, which I hope eventually comes true. And Bruce, it's actually the Kiwis and New Zealanders who got this one. So I'm sorry about that. It's the protected operations. It's like operations that happen at really low altitude. You know, those are prime candidate. They're low. If a plane is flying below the trees, it's got bigger problems than a drone. Like you said.
Actually, having said, I said that to CAA before they brought in that protected thing, and their response to me was, but you never know when a helicopter might need to do an emergency auto rotation into that stand of trees where you're flying. And I told them to get stuff.
The helicopter has way worse problems than your drone if he's auto-rotated into your backyard.
Now, something y'all might have missed last week in one of the FAA announcements is that the University of North Dakota is leading up a 5-university team. One of the things they're studying is shielded operations. So the talk has started. Now, that particular study is not necessarily for FPV. It's like, hey, let's look what FPV can do. They're trying to figure out the best way that the shielded operation aspect can then be incorporated into the NAS. So, yes, it needs to be done. It needs to be done. But we're talking the speed of the government here. And if you really look back in the last 5 years, the FAA has done more in the last 5 years than they have in the last 65 years or whatever it is when they were formed. When it comes to advancement of aviation. So they understand that, they're the dinosaur. They understand that, but they're working on it.
I got to tell you, and again, I'm not defending the government because they do horrible things sometimes, but everyone, without exception, that I've met in person and all the dealings I've had with the FAA have been positive. They're just normal people. Collectively, maybe they're evil, but individually, my local FSDO people, they're pretty cool. And they're trying to help. But again, their hands are tied. And I think, Jason, you'll agree with this, that your local FSDO and all these individuals again, there's no police. The only way that anyone ever gets caught doing anything wrong in the United States right now is if someone reports it.
And they still need all the evidence to back it up and everything else. So, hey, before we get too far, Joseph asked in the chat, what are shielded operations? If someone can share that too.
Okay.
Since we have it here, I can explain. Basically, what it means is that you're flying in an environment where there is no chance of encountering manned aviation. So that in New Zealand is defined as flying lower than the height of the tallest structure within 100 meters, which is about 109 yards or something. So it means basically that you're flying perhaps next to a building, next to a tree, within a courtyard or something, so that there's not going to be a plane come along and get in the way. So it's a very simple.
Does that also count for the ground? So within 100 meters of the ground, in an open field? So there has to be a tree, right?
There has to be some object. In fact, there's two aspects to the one in New Zealand. Initially, they just said there had to be a shield, which was a tree or a flagpole or a building or something. But then they added something called a barrier. So because under the shielded operations, you can fly right alongside an airfield. You can fly next to a runway, but there must be a barrier. So you must have, if you're flying that close, there has to be something like a fence, so that if you lose control and your drone drifts, as freestyle drones do, you lose control, they just drift gently with the wind.
So Drew, you can do some proximity flying next to the airport chain link fence.
Let's go.
Right, man.
I do it in New Zealand. I fly next to the airport. I fly below the level of the fence. It's only a 5-bar fence, but I can fly really low. And technically speaking, I'm legally allowed to do it because it's a shielded operation.
Wow. Okay. Jason, are there any other questions that we have here?
No, I see a bunch of people just kind of chatting over there.
Okay. If there's any specific questions for everybody, go ahead and put them in the form of a $100 super chat, and we'll get right to it.
You're splitting that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Ken's right. When you talk to the individual people that make up these bureaucracies, generally speaking, they're good people, and they have an understanding of what's going on. They have an affinity. But what happens is, as you move up the chain of command, we all know deadwood floats, and as you get closer to the top, that's where you encounter the bureaucrats and the career bureaucrats and the politicians who who have no connection to the people below. Almost every bureaucracy has really good people with feet on the ground, but as you get to the top, you start dealing with people who are just more interested in their own best interest than anyone else's. It happens universally in every bureaucracy I've worked with.
Yeah, the fat cats, man. I want to steer this back to, and maybe Kenji and Vic can address this, specifically for the FPV community and builds. When the words remote ID are put out there in the interverse there, people are very frightened about somebody's going to come take my drone, or I'm not going to be able to fly my quad. So what about that? Can we still build 2 years from now? Will we still be able to build it? Will there just be a little thing that we can attach and then good to go? Or is it going to kill? And the second part of that question, please tell me that you guys are letting these other people in the committee know, and the FAA know, that you cannot have fun flying FPV without FPV. What's right now, I think, as the law stands right now, is FPV illegal? I mean, just out there by yourself?
No, it's not. And actually, in the final rule, the FAA refused to define BVLOS or VLOS, because then what they do is they then refer back to what is already being used, and that is that you can use your spotter within proximity. I don't remember the wording, but you can do that right now. And I think that's part of why they did that, because they didn't really want to get into it, which is one of the reasons why Kenji and Dave are having their phone call tomorrow, is let's get this out there. Let's get this done. The FAA understands that the wording as it is now could be taken as making FPV illegal. And they know that's they can't do that. They can't do that because then compliance will literally be zero in that particular instance. And they're not out to shut down anything. Even Bruce, even when Bruce says that, that's true. They're not out there to shut anything down. Do they want to regulate it? Yeah, probably too much. Well, not even probably. I think they do want to regulate it too much. But that's why they have the DAC. If they listen to it, yeah, that's great. As far as the technical aspects of RID, the standard's just going to be how it comes from the factory. The other part will be the module aspect of it, and I'll let Kenji do that one.
Yeah, so there's a couple things with building drones. There's a home built exception. So what that does is it's for drones that are built for complete hobby, whatever, just for recreational purposes and doing that for fun. And you can slap a module on that. And that's going to consist of a Bluetooth or Wi-Fi and then a GPS module. So that's what it's going to consist of. And as technology goes, that Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and GPS have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's a good thing. I wasn't too jazzed about the fact that it's going to require GPS because that's more weight and all that stuff. But that's sort of what you're looking at for a lot of your home builds. Or you can fly it or free it, which is
don't forget the self-diagnostics on that module. It has to be able to.
No, the module won't turn the drone off. The module system doesn't turn the drone off. It's just the standard system.
It must report a fault if it's unable to broadcast.
Then it's up to you. Then we get to be adults and decide whether or not to fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, but does the module itself?
Hey, Bruce, you were just saying break the rules. So.
I would never break the rules, mate. Not me.
No, the module does not shut the drone down.
Yeah.
All the module will do is
the drone down. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying if the remote ID is for some reason not broadcasting, then the operator must be made aware of that by the remote ID device. May not fly without an operative. So you've got
like
to have
a blinky red light.
Yeah, you've got to have that self-diagnostic as part of the module,
right,
which means extra weight, because obviously you need to determine whether it's actually transmitting and whether the data it's transmitting is valid. So that's extra circuitry on the remote ID device.
Well,
not
such
just
a small amount.
I mean, a blinky.
The weight issue shouldn't be part of the argument. I mean, that's minuscule.
There's so many different things to complain about.
Yeah.
I just think we need to focus on the things that matter the most. Like argue for shielded operations. That should be getting the most attention. Arguing whether or not the remote ID module, whatever it is, because we still don't have any technical specifications, has to have a blinky red light. Who cares? We'll get to that because there's no tech specs around that.
Yeah. The other one that we'd like to see is the notify and fly. So if you can just log into an app and say, hey, I'm flying here at this time, at this altitude or whatever, I think that should be good enough, because guess what? The security folks, if they need to know what's going on, it's I'm flying here at this time. It's
Well, and we have data on that because
Mhm.
air services like AirMap, Kitty Hawk, those are already usable.
Yeah,
I regularly use AirMap to fly in controlled airspace. I live very close to an airport and I fly to school down the street, and I can only get authorization up to 50 feet. But it happens automatically. I'm like, oh, I want to fly here, and it says, okay, boom, text message from the FAA. Yeah, you can fly up to 50 feet. And again, with FPV, I do not need to fly over 50 feet to have a good time. So I'm chilling. So I'm like, we're using this system already, and we're proving it in America. So I think that's something that really needs to be pushed for.
You know what, Drew?
That as an option.
I think that what the FAA and the government want is a passive system where you don't have to count on responsible flyers to do that.
Yeah, of course. But I think that's what I'm saying is we need to fight that. We need to fight and say that, listen, we've got as you say, a passive system in place. It's working. There are, we've got data that's from this actual country. Let's continue to use this system.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right. Up to a certain altitude, right? Dude, I only need 100 feet.
Right.
I'm chilling.
So, yeah, this is quite a lot to think about, but I have to ask this question. Is the Drone Advisory Committee a placebo? Will they actually listen to you?
Let's hope so. They have in the past. Now, they didn't listen to everything in RID, and the people on the RID ARC were not happy about it. ARC is the Aviation Rulemaking Committee. Some of the other stuff they have listened to. I was on one of the task groups that dealt with waivers, and they listened to us on that. But yeah, like you said, we're the A stands for advisory, not adversary, but advisory.
Yeah.
So that's what, it's the spirit of cooperation with everybody on the board or on the committee. And will they listen? I'm going in with the fact. I'm just going with the attitude that they will.
Can you go in with a gun? Make them listen?
Probably not.
No.
I'm gonna go with a big hard no on that one.
Okay.
I'm just so pleased that all the bad actors will actually be fitting a remote ID to their craft before they commit atrocities.
Well, it's not designed to keep you from being stupid because stupid people have money.
So
that's why you're right.
What's really important on the DAC is to actually be involved, and it's involvement in the task groups which do the actual work, where people can make a real impact in terms of the final product and the recommendations that come out of the DAC. And the FAA does listen to the DAC, and we see that in a bunch of documents, including, for example, UTM ConOps 2.0 and all those sort of documents that sort of guide the FAA. So I think Vic and I are going to be a little bit different because you watch a DAC meeting, and it's usually you can fall asleep. It's like, but we're committed to actually asking questions and being involved and making sure that people understand it's just not a rubber stamp. There's we need to keep people accountable and making sure that they're doing the job of representing their constituencies. Because you see a lot of people just saying, oh, the people on the DAC are awesome. No, you need to ask questions about the subject matter that they're discussing. So you'll see that from us.
And I think, too, that I'm going to go in there, and I think Kenji is, too. We haven't really talked about this, but I'm going to go in there with the attitude as they want to hear from us. Everybody else on that DAC wants to hear from us because they do not have that perspective.
That's good.
Ask them for a copy of the risk assessment on which these regulations are based, because you need that. No, seriously, because
I understand what you're saying.
Without a risk assessment is a lunatic, and if you can
maybe don't follow Bruce's advice because he gets thrown out of government meetings.
Yeah, he doesn't allowed to talk anymore.
But Bruce, you and I have the opportunity here to talk to people that can conduct themselves without getting thrown out of a government agency, and I think that
still good people anyway.
I think the most useful thing we could do is boil down to what are the things you and I are purely a hobbyist. I mean, I guess you could say I do the business side, but the point is, we have the opportunity to say, look, what guys, DAC members that we're lucky enough to be on a call with, what are the three most important things that we as the FPV community would want you to fight for? I would say, without a doubt, number one would be shielded operations clause. That's like wish list numero uno. Mm-hmm. But like what are really the three things that we as a community could hope that the FAA could advocate for us? and I'm just one voice of many, but I think shielded operations would be number one. Would you agree with that, Bruce? What would you say is number two or number three?
Certainly, it's probably important for you guys in the USA. The other thing I think too is to categorize. In aviation, full-size aviation, you don't say airplane and talk about all the airplanes that are there. You have categories, you have classifications depending on the risk profile of an aircraft and of all the requirements. But as far as the FAA is concerned, drone's a drone is a drone. Whether it's a GPS-guided flight with no skill drone, or a freestyle recreational drone, or a racing drone, or it's a old oily nitro trainer flying in circles, they are all exactly the same to the FAA. They need to transfer their strategy for dealing with manned aviation to unmanned aviation by saying, well, they're not all equal. They don't have the same risk profile. Therefore, perhaps we don't need the same rules for each drone to be identical. We should bear in mind that people flying freestyle drones are not going to be doing the same things or even able to do the same things that's people flying a Mavic or a Phantom 4. Let's look at the historical data, the incidents we've had. How many airports have been strafed by quarter-scale Spitfires with gas motors and people flying with full-channel radio control systems? None. It is the DJI Phantom camera drone users who are untrained, unskilled, and unaware of the rules. They're the problem, people. So let's give the others a bit more slack.
What's the ask here? I think jump ahead, right? So risk profiles are a way to prove an ask, right? So what's the ask? That certain weight limits should be treated differently, certain sizes should be treated differently. What's the real ask? And then you can use these risk profiles to prove the validity of the ask.
Give them the freedom. Ask that the rules be proportional to the risk associated with different types of unmanned aerial vehicles.
Yeah, but jump ahead. Paint me, what does that look like? How would you divide it up? Would you divide it up by weight? Would you divide it by size?
Well, look to overseas. In Europe, they've divided it up by weight. They've also divided it up by capability. There are a number of ways. And I say, get them to look to other regulators, because why do you need to reinvent the wheel? There are some really good rules out there. And this sort of, look at what other countries have done. This is the shielded operation, for example, as we're talking about. New Zealand invented that. Look to New Zealand, copy that. When it comes to categorization and matching rules to risk, look to the EU. I'm not totally happy with their rules, but at least they make sense.
Mm-hmm.
You're preaching to the choir, man.
That's pretty open-ended, though. I think.
Yeah, but you guys have to bring it.
That you're smart, Bruce. I think that you could take it a step further for all the complaining you've done, and maybe
complaining.
Propose something, right? Say I as Bruce believe that 250 should be whatever the hell I want, and under a pound should be give me 100 feet, and above that is something, right? But you're just kind of saying, hey, they need to do this, but help us out. How do you think it could be divided up specifically?
You can't make up the categories on the fly in this short amount of time.
Oh no, I'm not saying do it now, but let's meet again. Let's work on this.
Well, let's go the other way and say, let's go the other way and say, copy Canada. Let's say that below a certain weight, no prescriptive rules. You don't need prescriptive rules. Prescriptive rules always have loopholes and things. In Canada, if you do anything that endangers people, property, or aviation, you've broken the rule. And it's really easy. There are no outs. There's no grey areas. It's very simple. If someone does something bad and causes injury or damage, they've broken the rule. It's not prescriptive, but so it's really easy to enforce, and that's what they need to do. And why they've got 250 grams as the limit in Canada? It's worked for sub 250, so why wouldn't it work for sub 1 kilo? I mean, that's what you need to do.
Well, in Canada also, they've got standoff rules we don't have here. So, we got to be careful saying let's be like Canada.
Yeah, only in the sub 250. There's no prescriptive standoff rules in sub 250. You can fly.
No, you're using sub 250, and sub 250 is not a huge on the commercial side. It's not a huge part of the process.
Becoming very big with things like the Mavic Mini, because people are realizing that having sub 250 in the USA means that they don't have to register unless they're 107. But then again, we've got the stupid thing. Well, why does
250 thing? It's just this arbitrary number that got thrown out, and everything below 250 is so boring. I mean, can we just get a pound?
Oh, come on!
Just give me 800 grams.
This is 190, and it's not boring. Oh, I froze. This is 190. It's not boring. A little naked 6 on there.
Yeah.
But I just think it's this arbitrary number that doesn't really seem to mean anything. I think it's. I don't know where it even came from.
It was a marketing thing. It was a marketing thing by DJI because they knew that if they said that you don't have to register this drone, then some people would think that you also didn't have to comply with the rules. That I get emails all the time from people saying, well, since I don't have to register my drone, can I go fly at the airport? No, you can't. You have to follow all the rules if you're flying in the airspace. That's
The 250's been around before DJI put out the Mavic.
Yeah.
It was on
It's
the
been around a while.
2016
well, they marketed it.
2016 arc.
But
Why
so
not?
is the 250, talking about like the three big things. We're
Yeah,
talking
let's
to
go
the
back
DAC
to
here.
that.
We got three big
the
things.
list started.
Is 250 on that list? Like, it's just an arbitrary thing. And I think we know shielded operations. I think, risk-based. I don't even know what Bruce is talking about. Dividing up drone profiles, that it makes sense. It just needs to be flushed out more.
Yeah.
But what's number 3? Is it 250? Yeah, you can just point out what we can work on.
Yeah, exactly.
You do the easy
I'll
part.
give you a number
It's
3.
totally
I'll give you a
arbitrary.
number 3. Make it easy
Okay.
to have a temporary FRIA. Get that exception
That's
process.
a great one.
And
What does
that
that
would be
mean?
an awesome one. It would be, like my cities here. Like I said, we didn't fight. They were actually very nice with the Parks Department here in Lakewood. And we got three of them opened up. 3 of our parks opened up for UAS work, and plating.
Mhm.
And if all of a sudden all we have to have FRIAs and everything, then we're shut down. We're back to square one with that. So FPV is another thing. We've got, I hang out with some guys for the FPV here, not as much as I'd like to because of COVID, but they just, Wednesday afternoon, we look at the weather here in Colorado. It's like, well, we could have 8 inches of snow. It could be 80 degrees and pretty much the same day. So we have to be careful what the weather is. Wednesday afternoon, everything looks good for Saturday. Let's get together and race.
Mhm.
We need that process in place to where it's like a, announce and fly. I think that would be a good number 3.
Those are very
I
good
think
things.
they could work really well together, right? So, announce and fly can work really well for an individual. I go to the school down the street on a Sunday, and I'm going to say I'm here by myself, and I'm going to fly for the next hour, just like I do already. But then, a temporary FRIA is great to say, okay, this weekend we're having a race, and there's going to be 100 people here, and you don't want 100 people announcing they're flying. So we're saying there's going to be lots of drones here. I think it works really well together.
I'm going to add that to the argument list.
Well, hey, I really appreciate. I appreciate you guys making time. This is a unique opportunity to have these two guys. Hopefully, they're being good advocates for us. But before we let you guys go, and I hope we covered everything. If there's Jason, are there any other questions that we haven't missed from the?
Nope, just a lot of chatting in the chat.
Okay, good. Let's go around the round table here one time and just get everybody's prediction for the future. Just a general.
I live in the future, Ken. I'm already there. I know what's happening.
That's right. It's already Friday where Bruce is.
That's right.
It's Friday at 4:00 in the afternoon here.
You get me those lottery numbers and I'll split it with you. So, Drew, your view of the future. Yeah.
My prediction of the future is we're going to have a bright FPV community and industry no matter what, whether it's based on civil disobedience or whether it's based on compromise with the FAA. I just did what you did, Vic. It's going to happen. We will find a way. FPV started underground, and we'll just do it. No one's going to stop us. We would like to do it in a reality where we get along with the government and there are rules that are followable enough, and we can follow those rules. And if that's not the case, we'll just do it anyway. So no matter what, there's going to be FPV. We open Pandora's box. FPV is out in the world. It's going to happen forever.
Yeah, that's good. Let's go to Vic.
Oh gosh. I think 32 months from now, we're going to look back and say, we had a lot of worry about a whole lot of stuff that didn't need to be worried about. I think it's going to work out. I'm an optimist by default, and so maybe that's maybe I'm being too optimistic. But I think it's all going to work out. I think we're going to find the compromises we need, just like Drew said, and it's not going to be as bad as we think it is. We'll pull this up on our little 3-inch computers that we'll be having in 3 years. And look at it and say, you know what? We were worried a little bit too much, but that doesn't mean we need to let our guard down.
And Kenji?
So my prediction is there'll be flying cars.
Jetpacks.
Yeah. But in all seriousness, one thing I want to say before we signed off was I want to encourage everybody in the FPV community to get involved. And what that means is getting involved at your local level, talking to your city councilors, talking to your parks folks, and just get to know them and just share your passion about what you do with them and help shape sort of the policies that happen at the local level. I can't tell you how much of an impact that has. Mm-hmm. Testify, go to city council meetings, go to your state government areas, or actually when they have legislature in session, if they have some UAS regulations coming on. Just get involved, because without you, I mean, we can talk all we want. That's where the rubber hits the road and where we can make a difference. So I'm just going to make that ask of everybody that's listening in.
Okay, good. And let's go to Jason and get your prediction for the future, sir.
Ken, I'm going to order you tube socks, and I'm going to make sure a drone delivers them personally when there is drone delivery. Yeah. I want you to film the whole process. No, seriously, I love the optimism from everybody. I think we'll be fighting about something different in 24 months. So I think it really is. This will all be a thing of the past. The buzzwords to watch out for, we've been saying this for a long time, is UTM. Watch for UTM. It could be really great. It could be really ugly. I think there's a world where we can have the Amazons of the world playing in UTM, and we can be playing in shielded operations as well, and everybody can get along and play nice. But I'm optimistic about everything.
And now, last but not least, Mr. Sunshine, to leave us on an upbeat note. Yeah.
Yes, upbeat. Yeah. I agree with Kenji. Everyone's got to be involved. Everyone has to stand up and be heard, because the only failure is to never have tried to make sure that things go properly. But I also believe that drone delivery will be a very common thing. It'll be far more common than anyone believes, but it's not going to happen in the skies above our heads. It's going to happen on the roads. When you order something from Amazon, it will be delivered by drone, but what'll happen, you'll be sitting there in your office or your home, your phone will go and it'll says, delivery in 5 minutes, this is your PIN code. You will go out to the sidewalk. A unmanned vehicle driving along the road will pull up outside. It's loaded with hundreds of packages. If it breaks down, it just stops. It doesn't fall from the sky. It's very cheap to run, and people don't steal it for the parts. So it will pull up outside your house or your office, your key and your PIN number, a little door will open, there's your package, and then it will go on to its next delivery. That is the future of drone delivery in urban and suburban areas. So what that means is all these people that are currently pouring huge amounts of money into the flying drone delivery industry are going to wake up and realize, oh, there is actually no profit in this. Remember with the .com crash of 2000 when people suddenly realized, well, this internet isn't paved with gold and everything collapsed. That's what's going to happen with the flying drone delivery industry. And that means that all these grand plans that the FAA has made and all these companies are gearing up, they're going to realize the return on investment is not what they were promised. There'll be a huge retraction from that particular part of the drone thing, and the airspace will be freed up because the skies above our heads will not be clouded with drones. The sunlight won't be blocked by masses of drones. It'll be the little things wheeling around the streets in perfect safety. We don't have to worry about them falling on our heads because they're on the road. That's what will happen. So at that stage, we'll see a winding back of the rules. As Ken said, when cars first came out, you had to have a man walking in front of it with a red flag because it was such a dangerous thing. And in fact, when you approached an intersection, you had to fire a gun in the air from 100 yards away to warn horses and carriages that you were coming. And that's the situation we're at now. We've got all these rules and regulations for no risk, and eventually, when they finally do a risk assessment, when someone wakes up in the FAA and realizes, oh my goodness, we look like fools, we better do a risk assessment, then they'll say, oh, we've kind of overreacted here. We need to wind things back a bit. And then, as has been said, we'll end up with the ability to fly our toys. And we're talking about toys, people. These are not guns. These are not 2-ton automobiles traveling with enough kinetic energy to kill hundreds in one swoop. These are toys. They're not dangerous. They're intrinsically one of the safest things on the planet, proven by 10 years of historical evidence. Finally, we'll see some normality and some rationality return to the world, and everyone will be laughing at the Americans and how silly they were with remote ID.
Bruce Stradamus. Thank you, sir.
Oh my goodness.
Is that a...
Kenji sent me a text and said, wait till you see what I'm wearing.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
good.
fantastic. You can buy those? I didn't know you could buy those.
Why don't you own that yet, Ken?
Hello there.
Nobody gave me one for Christmas. My birthday's coming up, though. Oh my gosh. Can you even breathe in that?
Wow.
Man,
so
you could get a lot of jerky from that pigeon.